Okay, I am so excited that we have Dr. Darryl talking to us every time we get an opportunity to listen to him because he's just such a natural teacher and people just resonate so well and learn so much. So, thank you so much for being willing to give us some more of your genius. Would you say change your frequency, change your life?
Change your frequency, change your life. Yeah.
Yes, well, I cannot wait to hear more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Sheila hounded me forever for a name, and I had so many different things. Like I remember sending ideas back and forth. And I couldn't settle on anything. So finally I settled on change your frequency, change your life. Not because it was so profound, but because I could put anything under that umbrella and it would still work. Because frequency is the basis of which all of my classes and all of the things that I teach, it has to do with frequency. And I have been learning more and more how to put into words really that concept. Anything that has a frequency change changes to some degree, sometimes very dramatically. And I'm just going over my brain trying to think of things. I think about just water, and you have different types of water, and distilled water, and you have sea water, water from actually from the sea. Um, you have spring water, and all of these if you just put them in a glass, they pretty much look the same, but there is a different frequency there. And each glass of water, if you want to just say glass, each glass of water would do something different. One wouldn't be able to be used to do the same thing. You're not going to use um, if you try to drink the water from the ocean, you're going to have a lot different of an effect than if you were to drink distilled water or if you were to drink spring water, because the frequency is different. In quantum physics, there is something called the observer effect, and without trying to go too deeply into the observer effect, I really want to talk about a study. Well, it's not really a study because they've done it over and over, and it just kept duplicating the same thing. So they did this thing called, well, it ended up being called the double slit effect. And so they had these two slits, to put it crudely, and then they had photons of light that they were shooting at it, but singularly. And then they had something on the other side of that that would measure the imprint of the photons when it got through the slits. And there were only two. And the goal of this study was just to see if you singularly send these photons, at what percentage would one go through one slit and the other go through the other slit. That was the initial goal. Just trying to figure that out. One slit, the other slit. If you do it faster in succession, might it possibly hit the side and maybe some go more in one than the other? And so the way that they were going to determine the results was by the impressions on the wall behind it. And so logic said you would just have two, because you only had two slits and they weren't literally right next to one another. There's only two paths to the other side of that wall. And when they were able to measure it, they would have many more than two slits, four slits, five slits, six slits. And it made absolutely no sense. How could this be that you only have two entry points, but you're seeing it sprayed across the wall? And so they were unable to figure that out. So, as curiosity is, they decided, well, let's investigate. Let's do a little bit of digging. And so what they did was they put cameras there. And so now this was going to answer the question, because we can't make any sense of this. Put cameras there. And the cameras were going to actually record the photons going through, because there were theories. They're bumping into one another. They're splitting in half. There's some interference pattern that's happening here that stops them from lining up in the two areas. There has to be. So they put those cameras there. And the camera is going to record the magic so that they could find out what they don't know. But what they found out was that when they turned those cameras on, all of a sudden, what they expected happened. So now that it's being observed, you have the two slits. And then They cut the cameras off, and the pattern went back to the way it was before. And they cut the cameras back on, and the pattern went back. Now, quantum physicists, they don't explain this. Quantum physicists don't understand quantum physics. They're smarter than us because they're not trying to understand quantum physics. They just accept that these things are beyond our ability with our current knowledge. We do not understand how this works. So they don't understand it, but they understand that it is there. They understand that it's real. And so as we study this, as I study this, I'm not trying to understand it. I'm trying to see what other correlations in life I can make from that. Because energy, this is Darryl's logic. So it's way down here. Energy somehow changes when you look, when you perceive, when you have a thought, when you have an intention. Somehow, some way, energy can be modified by observing, intending, and having a thought around it. I stayed in a hotel this last couple of days, and I was down in the atrium area, and they had breakfast. They had like a buffet style breakfast, and there was a woman who she made waffles. You all know those have those waffle machines, and you can make your own. So you pour the mix in there and you turn it over and you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds before that's done. And what most people do is they go get their other food. They use that time to go get their other food, their coffee, whatever it is that they're going to do. And she didn't make it for the 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So when it's done, it starts making a noise. Beep. Now, there's not a line or anything like that. So there's not a lot of people waiting. But immediately, I see her turn around and look. And she's looking around the room. And then she starts the fake run. It's not the real run. It's like moving her body as though she's running in the same motion, but she's not going any faster at all. But she knows that she's expected to be in a rush now. She knows that people are looking at her. And for some reason, most of us do this. The observer effect, from my perspective, was happening on a totally different level, on a totally subconscious level. She had to go through all of this. I'm sure she didn't realize she was doing this, but she had to go through all of the emotions of a person who was rushing. But she got there. Not only did she not get there faster, I think that if we measured, she would have actually slowed her body down because her normal pace of walk was actually faster than the fake run that she was trying to put on. And I just thought to myself, because I people watch a lot, I said, that is interesting. That's the observer effect, in that there is an expectation. And when that expectation happens, you automatically, not all of us, but many of us automatically change frequencies in order to come in line with what's expected. I see it happen a lot. After I saw that, I started thinking about when there's an elevator and you're walking through the door, and the person sees you, and so they hold the elevator. It's very, very nice. People do that fake run. They don't walk any faster. They just move their arms in the way that they would if they were rushing, because it is expected that you're supposed to change your frequency when somebody's holding open the elevator. It's the observer effect all over again, but it's happening to us. We don't consciously realize that it's happening, which means our frequency changes based off of what our subconscious knows is the expectation. When we walk past people, this is going to sound so terrible, so I apologize. We put on that fake smile when you make eye contact. This is just the rule. We don't ever talk about it, but subconsciously we know the rule. If you make eye contact with somebody, you're supposed to smile. It's not real. You could have just you could be constipated or the opposite, and you could be on your way, like the toilet is right there and all you could think about is getting there. But if you made eye contact, you're subconsciously supposed to modify your frequency for that person. It is actually almost considered rude to not do it. And so I'm thinking, because I'm always thinking about the observer effect, frequency, what we're doing on a conscious level, what we're doing on a subconscious level, and how that's benefiting the totality of us. And so I think about that when it comes to our scanning system. Right now, I'm speaking about the AO scanner because as I stand here, we just had Day of Discovery in Utah, which was put on by Solex. And the AO scanner is the central theme of that particular company. Now we have other tools and we have supplements and we have terahertz ones and or 8 terahertz one and mats and all sorts of things. But I want to focus on the AO scanner because the observer effect is a huge part of quantum physics, quantum entanglement, and the system that we use to scan is based around quantum physics and quantum entanglement. The fact that we can send and imprint Cephis is based on quantum physics and quantum entanglement. So if we accept that and we accept the observer effect, how can we marry the two so that frequency is better utilized? So when we go back to that double slit experiment, the expectation of a result, especially when you are really focused in, you get what you asked for or what your brain allowed you to expect. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but my brain says that when human beings grow to a higher level of consciousness, where 4 or 5 wave patterns on the other side of that slit would make sense, you'd get that again. Because that's something that you can actually quantify. That's something that you can accept. That's something that you can expect. That's within your realm of expectation. It's not going to blow your mind. So the when you start measuring it after you understand it, then I think that the way that it happens will start becoming more clear. But we're not there yet. Let's go back to the scanner. We do have our scanner, and we can utilize vitals. We can utilize comprehensive. We can utilize inner voice. There's a couple ways we can do that. I teach people all the time about this. And sometimes, for many people, it's not necessary to analyze scans. I'm a practitioner, so I am analyzing scans. But I don't teach people who aren't practitioners to try to analyze their scans unless there's already a problem. I remember one time Lauren said what I thought was the most amazing thing. He says, I do my inner voice every morning. I listen to my tones and I eat something unhealthy, feeling like my tones are going to help balance out the imbalance that I'm putting in my body. And I can go on and on about the tones and how important they are. And they just got more important. And I probably will now that I'm thinking about it in just a minute. But my point here is if you are inclined to analyze, if we take the same concept of the observer effect and we apply it to the AO scanner. Now we can look at the scan from the perspective of what we're trying to find. And if we look at our reports from the perspective of what we are looking to find, the reports will modify themselves in order to help you do that. So I am not deeply into homeopathy. I'm surface level into homeopathy. Dr. Sheila is deep into homeopathy. So, from the observer effect standpoint, Dr. Sheila scanning people will probably give her different results than my scanning the same person because I am looking more at the emotional imbalance and how that's related to the physical. Not that Dr. Sheila isn't, but if she wanted to utilize her expertise in homeopathy, the homeopathy portion of it, if she scans from the perspective of that, would likely give her what she needs and what she's asking for in order to understand what she's looking at. I love to, in my practice, I do auriculotherapy. It's treatment of the ear. There are markings on the ear that can tell you about things that are in the body. And I examine the ear utilizing an electrical device. But you also can look at the ear as well. And if I do that, the body comes to life for me by this little ear that you have. But for most practitioners, they would never even consider looking at the ear. And if they did, they would find nothing. I'm not an iridologist. So if I looked in your eye, I would have to immediately reference a chart. I mean, like and even then, I don't know how good of a job that I would do, and all of the markings that might be there, I wouldn't even be able to see them because that is not in the realm of what my brain is actually looking for. I'm not expecting to find anything when I look at someone's eye. Someone who is a massage therapist, they can go over certain parts of the body, the back in particular, because you have that bladder meridian that goes down the back, and that bladder meridian actually has contact with every meridian in the body, which means from the back you can get to every part of the body. And depending on where you're stiff, where you have these knots, where things are in disarray, will allow the person that's utilizing their hands on you to have some concept of what's happening inside because they're utilizing a system that they are inclined to understand. Same with the reflexologist if they're touching your hand or touching your foot and then you make a noise and they know where they were at, they can have some concept of what's happening in the body. Let's take that back to the AO scanner. So in the AO scanner, you have vitals. And in vitals, people who are analytical by nature love vitals. They get lost in vitals. And they can look at even the ones and the nines. They don't want that classic report. I want the ones and the nines so I can see how far out these things are. And they're able to connect the dots differently than somebody who's not an analyst can do, and much more easily. Somebody who loves organs and understands how the organs affect the body. Comprehensive, it just kind of comes to life for those people because they're able to look at the liver and they say the liver is out, the pancreas is out, the gallbladder isn't. That just means something. It's the same report you or I might look at, but it just means something completely different for that person. And then you have people who are on the emotional side of things, and then they can look at the inner voice and then look at specific emotions and then tie those emotions back down to organs based off of whatever their observer is inclined to see. So, one mistake that, from my perspective, people make, and when I say it's a mistake, I mean it only if it's driving you crazy, is looking at all of your scans and saying, I've got to do the inner voice, I've got to do comprehensive, I got to do vitals, and then I've got to look at all of these different scans and I've got to see what everything says. From my perspective, they are looking at the body from different ways, like an iridologist, a meridian therapist, an auriculotherapist, a body worker, a reflexologist. You don't see the iridologist going into the area of the reflexologist in order to see what's happening. It might be helpful to know points on the hands and the feet. It might be helpful to know what's happening in the ear. It's definitely helpful to know where the organs are. But if they stay in the lane that their frequency vibrates on, then they're able to do their work without ever even getting tired. They don't stress their brains out. They don't stress themselves out because they know, the iridologist knows that every part of the human body is in the eye. So I can find what I need in the eye and then show you what's happening in the body, and then from there we make our recommendations on how we're going to deal with it. Somebody who loves the vital scan, they're able to look at which vitals are constantly out of balance, and then they're able to just tie from the vitals. The vitals becomes the base. Comprehensive just becomes a reference point. They can look at the blood numbers and say, oh yeah, the liver is probably stagnant. Let me just take a look over at the comprehensive and see if I'm right. Oh, it is. And then they're back out of comprehensive. They're not trying to analyze everything. Comprehensive for that person just becomes a reference point. For the person that is inclined to see the light inside of organs, they stare in the comprehensive and they're looking at numbers and they're looking how far away from 100 or from zero, depending on which way you're looking. How far away is that? Oh, wow. I would imagine the blood work might show this or that. And then they look at the vitals just as a reference because they've already made their determination off the comprehensive. I tend to do that off of inner voice. I love looking at how everything comes together for inner voice. And for me, I only use body systems as a reference when I know that the system is out of balance. If I know that the circulatory is out of balance, circulatory system, that body system circulatory chart it comes to life for me now because I've already determined that it is. Now I want to know why. And so I look at it. I run the body systems constantly, but I'm utilizing it for data and for optimizing. So changing your frequency and changing your life. If everything is a frequency, even what you are inclined to, and if we start running scans from the perspective of what it is that we're inclined to understand, then the observer effect becomes real for us. And it becomes real for us inside of the tool that we already have. So going back to inner voice, you have these. Whenever I run inner voice, I like to do inner voice with vitals because I get a lot of more information. To be honest, I don't know what inner voice without vitals even looks like now. I don't know whether or not it's changed or not, but I don't use it anyway. I always run inner voice with vitals, and I let people know that the music that they're listening to is not nearly as important as the frequency. Again, we have a new system that's set up, so I do have to analyze that. But what I do know is most people, when they get started on inner voice, they're looking at their tones and they're saying, oh, this is helping me to balance my emotions. And while that's true, since the body is thoroughly connected with the other, and you're seeing more than just emotions there, the frequencies that are there that have to do with vitals and have to do with organs are tied to the note that's out of balance. So by default, they're being supported by the notes. By default, they're being supported by the sound. So when someone listens to their inner voice report, they're listening to all of the frequencies that are necessary to balance out all of what you're seeing there, not just the emotions. The emotions are the top level, but the emotions are connected to vitals and comprehensive. And it's not just short talk to say that. It truly is resolving or helping to resolve all of those issues. And that's the reason why they change when you actually come back, because frequency changes. And when you change the state of frequency of anything, you change the makeup of it to some degree. So if we change our frequencies, we change our lives. If we listen to our sound frequencies, we change our reports. If we change the way that we approach our scanner, we approach our scans, we approach the system itself, if we change the way that we do it, and then we start expecting the information that we're seeking, then we will get it because the observer effect is real. The observer effects tells us that the energy of observation, focus, thought, and expectation that you bring to energy can modify the energy actually does. And that's from the scan, that's from every style of energy. When the frequency changes, everything about it changes. So I'm cutting it short. Not that it's a short talk, but for some reason I was able to very calmly. I usually go on these long rants and it takes me forever to get to what I'm trying to say. For some reason the energy in this particular place was so relaxing that it made me just get it all out in a shorter period of time. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Darryl, that was golden. I mean, every single thing we've heard today has been such a gold mine, but this, I mean, seriously. So even relating this to when I get a lot of feedback about, well, I can't send this to people because they'll freak out. I personally don't get that because that's not my vibration.
Yes.
And so please remember that when you are speaking to people and things that you're encountering, it could be you're drawing your own vibration. So if you don't like what you're drawing, you've got to look at that. What do you want to draw? Because like you said, you're going to see what you're looking for. So if you want to see something different, you've got to look for something different. Do we have any questions? Anybody got a question?
I really am not that smart. It's an illusion. Thank you.
I mean, I've been following Dr. Wayne Dyer for years, and he always used to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And everything you said, it just hit home for me. And actually, you helped me realize that I was kind of doing that. I was looking at all the things, but I'd just be like scrolling past. I'm like, I'm not worrying about chromosomes. I'm not worrying about this. You know what I mean? I was doing that. So it really kind of helped me validate that, all right, without knowing it, that I was, I wasn't, I just, like I said, love the multi scan, but, in trying to decipher and find that nugget. But definitely, I'm making notes here going, okay, so we have the scan frequency, and then we have the subject frequency, and then we have our frequency. And we
Yes.
need to be mindful of
Yes.
where every one of those pieces is at for that trifecta to work just so beautifully in a person's healing.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
when you're looking at the scan for other people, your frequency matters. The
Yes.
frequency that you're in you're bringing that to the equation.
So when we get someone who maybe is a little bit, I hope this works, should there be something we should be doing to get them in that zone
Well,
before?
no, they're most likely they might start pretending to be in that zone. But listen, everything is a frequency, and disbelief too is a frequency.
Yeah.
As long as a person, this is my perspective, as long as a person is not in disbelief,
Yeah.
then the frequencies that you send their way will have effect.
Okay.
The greater the belief, the more the effect. But the mere fact of I hope this works
There's
shows you that something the door is open.
open.
When they have closed off their frequency, they have that right to
Yes.
close the door. And if the door is closed, don't be so arrogant as to think that your frequency is stronger than theirs in their own orbit.
Yeah.
We are all in our own orbits, and the planets don't bump into each other because they are in their own orbits. If they ever got out of their own orbits, they would sway across the solar system and collide, but they never do because they understand that their orbit is their own. So everyone's orbit is stronger for them than yours. When the door is open, you can merge energies. But when it's not, you're wasting your time. And that's a hard pill to swallow, especially when it's somebody that you love. But when they open that, when the door finally opens, it'll come flooding right in. But I went, see, I just went off on a tangent after not, I was doing good. But when you, but to answer your question, because I would like to, I did answer it, but I want to go right back and answer it again, just so that I'm clear. I hope this works. Is not, they're not at zero. They are on the side of it working.
Awesome.
And then the more progress that they see, the more they will say it is working, and then it will just speed up
Yep.
exponentially.
The door keeps opening.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
And remember, this isn't us to up to us. Um, People are in their own journey, and sometimes there's other things they have to go through before they're even ready, and they may never be called to this.
That's right.
So we can only do our part and keep our expectation and our focus.
Yeah.
So to influence.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Darrell, is there, before you scan somebody that we may think is a little bit skeptical, is there any protocols that you would put in place to maybe change that, change their frequency before? Like, would you put them on a PEMF mat? Would you use the rain before you even scan them?
So I was about to ask you if they were there, but your question lets me know that in the scenario that you're talking about, that they're there. When I'm dealing with somebody that doesn't seem to have that right frequency, no, I don't do any of those things. That for me is when, and I'm completely changing the topic of my talk, but I think it's important. That for me is when the bone conducting headphones become imperative because you have to change the conversation. When you're talking about frequency in the way that people see as woo woo, they don't see touch as woo woo. They might say that's silly, but they don't see it as energy coming through the air. And so I move away from the conversation and I only talk about the fact that we're going to listen to their voice. They might not understand, but they do know that their voice print is similar to a handprint or a footprint. And so they might not understand how you can get anything out of it, but usually they're a little piqued by that. And then when you have that happening and I'm running their scan and they're not just hearing it but feeling a vibration, they don't understand that, but they feel something. And so now you have gotten outside of their emotional body and you're in their physical body because that's where they live right now, in their physical body. And all of these things are physical. For those people, I even let the Cephis run with the sound up because they don't understand the concept of transferring frequencies via vibration, but they're less inclined to reject it because they can hear it and they can feel it, right? And so now they've experienced that and they've experienced it in the realm of the physical. Now, when I look at their report and I go over things with them, I'm showing them, and I don't tell them otherwise. So by default, they tend to think that their voice did all of this. And if I leave them in that mindset long enough to help them, by the time they realized that it's more than just their voice, now they don't care because I've proven that this can help them before I took them completely out of the resistance. Can I expound on it a little bit more? Okay. So my brother, he's gonna kill me because he's gonna see this. Um, he was experiencing something about 6 months ago. And it was a physical thing, and he knew that I'm a naturopath, and he knows that I work with energy and etc. And he called me and he just said, "Okay, look, I need for you to help me. I don't understand everything. I just need for you to help me." And I said, "Okay," because I'd been asking him over and over for about a year and a half. Why don't you allow me to scan just basically telling him that I do things. And this particular time, I'm sorry, before he said that, I told him that I said I wasn't going to ask again, but you really seem to be in need. I am going to ask one more time. And so he said, "Well, what do you need from me?" And like someone else said, "Well, I already got your information, but go ahead and send me a voice sample." He sent me a voice sample. I ran an easy scan. I was able to see what was going on, meaning what he told me was happening. I was able to see it in the scan. And I sent him the voice print, or excuse me, his inner voice scan back. And I said, "Can you listen to these with headphones?" And about an hour later, I sent him a text message and I said, "I just want to assess because I assessed before 1 to 10. How bad is this right now?" It was 10. And it had been 10 for about 3 months, every day. And his response back was, "I am so sorry. Please don't be annoyed with me, but I haven't listened to your tones yet." And so now I got to tell him because I want my answer. I could have waited, but I didn't want to wait. And I said, "Listen, what I did has nothing to do with your listening to those tones. I'm asking you a different question. What is it between 1 and 10?" And then he responded back about 5 minutes later and said, "Okay, I just assessed this. I'm sure that this is in my brain, but it's at about an 8 now." We went on, and by the next day, we were down to like a 2 or a 3. Now, mind you, he had been at a 10 for months. So there was no placebo effect going on here. This wasn't a chance. He wasn't just about to come out of this. This just he, it didn't happen on the day that I did my scan. No part of him thought that. And so now he's my biggest fan. Now he's all on board. But after he got a thorough understanding, because he called me and said, explain to me what this is. And now he says, if you had told me what this was prior to doing it, I probably would have still sent you the voice scan, but I would have felt like I was annoyed that you knew the seriousness of my situation and still wasted my time with this joke. And I don't know that I would have taken any of this. He said the best thing that ever happened was the fact that I didn't know what you were doing until I already got better. And that is not why I do what I told you. That reinforces, oh, yeah, when you get people who aren't with this, leave all of the talk into an area that they can understand. And when they get better, they won't care anymore. And if they never understand, they still won't care. Sorry for taking that long on your ass. Thanks.